The shuttle's engines hummed softly as it approached the massive structure floating in space. Tom Bradley pressed his face against the small window, watching the Galactic Academy grow larger with each passing second. The building stretched for miles in every direction, its crystal and metal surfaces catching the light from 3 different suns. Thousands of smaller ships moved around it like insects around a flower. Tom had dreamed of this moment for years. When Earth finally cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel, the galaxy had opened its doors to humanity. The Academy represented the pinnacle of education across known space, where the brightest minds from hundreds of worlds came to study together. Being chosen as Earth's first exchange student felt like winning the cosmic lottery. The docking bay was enormous, filled with ships of every imaginable design. Some looked like geometric puzzles made of light. Others appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and breathing walls. Tom grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers off the shuttle. The moment his feet touched the Academy's floor, something changed. The busy chatter of the docking bay died down. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Beings of all shapes and sizes turned to stare at him, then quickly looked away. A group of tall, blue-skinned students who had been laughing together suddenly went quiet and hurried past. Tom checked his clothes, wondering if he had somehow violated some alien dress code. His simple jeans and university sweatshirt seemed appropriate enough. He had studied the Academy's cultural guidelines for months, memorizing proper greetings for dozens of species. Maybe he was standing wrong? A crystalline being approached him, its body ringing like wind chimes with each step. This had to be his assigned guide, Krim, a senior student from the Vorthak homeworld. Tom smiled and raised his hand in the traditional Vorthak greeting. Krim stopped abruptly, his crystal body actually developing small cracks that spread across his surface. "You are the human," he said, his voice sounding like breaking glass. "Tom Bradley." "That's me," Tom replied cheerfully. "Thanks for volunteering to show me around. I know you didn't have to do this." "No," Krim said quietly, the cracks in his body deepening. "I did not volunteer." He turned and began walking quickly toward the exit. "Come, we must get you registered before the evening meal." Tom hurried to keep up, confused by his guide's obvious distress. Behind them, the docking bay gradually returned to its normal noise level, but Tom noticed beings gave them a wide berth as they walked. Some actually crossed to the other side of the corridor to avoid coming close. The Academy's interior was breathtaking. Vast halls stretched in all directions, their walls covered in living murals that shifted and changed as they watched. Gardens floated in midair, tended by beings who seemed to be made of pure energy. Students from across the galaxy moved through the spaces, their conversations creating a beautiful chaos of languages and sounds. But wherever Tom walked, silence followed. Groups of students would be talking animatedly until they noticed him approaching, then they would fall quiet and drift away. The effect was so consistent it couldn't be coincidence. "Is there something wrong with me?" Tom asked Krim as they entered a massive elevator that could easily hold 50 beings. They were the only passengers. "You are human," Krim replied as, if that explained everything. "Yes, but I mean, am I doing something rude? Nobody seems to want to be around me." Krim's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. "You do not know?" "Know what?" The elevator opened onto a floor dedicated to student services. Here, the reaction was even more pronounced. A desk clerk, covered in soft fur and with large, gentle eyes, actually whimpered when she saw Tom approaching. Her hands shook as she processed his registration documents. "Dormitory assignment," she squeaked, her voice barely audible. "Level 7, room 847. Your roommate requested a transfer this morning." "A transfer?" Tom looked at Krim. "But classes don't start for 3 days." Word travels quickly here, Krim said. Your arrival was announced yesterday. They took another elevator to the residential level. The dormitory halls were designed to accommodate beings of all sizes, with adjustable room configurations and multiple atmosphere types. Tom's assigned floor seemed to be the standard oxygen-nitrogen mix that most species could tolerate. Room 847 was spacious and comfortable, with a large window overlooking one of the Academy's beautiful gardens, but it was also completely empty. Not just of personal belongings, but of the second bed and desk that should have been there. My roommate really did transfer out, Tom said, sitting heavily on the remaining bed. This is not how I imagined my first day going. Krim stood in the doorway, clearly unwilling to enter the room. I must go. Orientation materials are on the desk. Classes begin in 3 days. Wait, Tom called, but the crystalline being was already hurrying away down the hall. Tom spent the rest of the day exploring the academy alone. Every common area, library, and study space he entered quickly emptied. In the vast dining hall, servers would approach his table nervously, deliver his food with shaking hands, and retreat as quickly as possible. Other students gave him a radius of at least 20 feet. The strange thing was, Tom could see the curiosity in their eyes. They watched him from a distance, whispering among themselves. Whatever was making them afraid didn't stop them from being fascinated. That night, Tom sat in his empty room reviewing the situation. He had studied xenobiology extensively, preparing for exactly this kind of cultural challenge. Different species had different social cues, territorial instincts, and communication styles. But this felt like something deeper than cultural misunderstanding. He opened his laptop and began researching everything he could find about interspecies psychology. The Academy's database was vast, containing studies from thousands of worlds. As he read, a pattern began to emerge. Almost every spacefaring species in the galaxy had evolved from prey animals. Their ancestors had survived by being quick, clever, and very good at recognizing danger. Tom leaned back in his chair, pieces clicking together in his mind. Humans were different. Earth was different. His planet was a world where predators and prey had engaged in an arms race for millions of years, producing creatures of incredible lethality. And at the top of that food chain sat humanity, a species that had hunted everything else into extinction or domestication. Maybe the other species weren't being rude. Maybe they were just following instincts millions of years old, instincts that whispered warnings about the soft-spoken creature from the deathworld who smiled too easily and moved with the unconscious confidence of something that had never been prey. Tom closed his laptop and looked out at the garden below. Tomorrow, he would find a way to prove he wasn't dangerous. He just had to figure out how to convince an entire galaxy that the apex predator in their midst only wanted to study and learn. It might be harder than he thought. Dr. Millock adjusted her 8 arms nervously as she reviewed the proposal one more time. Her office overlooked the Academy's main courtyard, where she could see students giving the lone human a wide berth as he sat reading under a flowering tree. 3 days had passed since Tom Bradley's arrival, and the situation had only gotten worse. The Althan empaths had requested transfers to other schools. 2 Vorthak students had suffered complete crystalline fractures just from sharing an elevator with the human. Even the maintenance drones seemed to malfunction more frequently on his floor. The Academy's carefully balanced multicultural environment was falling apart, and nobody understood why. It makes no sense, Dr. Millock muttered to herself, her tentacles tapping anxiously against her desk. Her specialty was interspecies behavioral psychology, and she had seen every kind of cultural clash imaginable. But this was different. This was primal. Her desk communicator chimed. Dr. Millock, this is Dean Horath. Please report to Conference Room Alpha immediately. The conference room was packed with the Academy's senior staff. Dean Horath, A massive being whose species had evolved from herd animals on a low-gravity world stood at the head of the table. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of stress. "The situation is becoming critical," the dean announced without preamble. "We have received 47 transfer requests since the humans' arrival. 3 students have been hospitalized with anxiety attacks. The board of directors is demanding answers." Professor Gorlak, who taught advanced xenobiology, raised one of his 4 hands. "Perhaps we should simply send him home. Earth will understand." "Absolutely not," replied Dr. Yalara from the Cultural Exchange Department. "This is our first contact with humanity at an academic level. Sending him away would create a diplomatic incident." Dr. Millick cleared her throat. "I have a proposal." The room fell silent. "We need to understand what makes humans so disturbing to other species. I suggest we conduct a controlled psychological evaluation." "What kind of evaluation?" the dean asked. Dr. Millack activated the room's holographic display. "We use the Fear Beast." Gasps echoed around the room. The Fear Beast was the Academy's most closely guarded training tool, a Class 7 shape-shifting predator that manifested as each observer's deepest terror. It was used only in advanced military and diplomatic training, and even then, with extensive safety protocols. "That creature has broken seasoned warriors," Professor Gorlak protested. "You want to subject a student to that?" "Think about it," Dr. Millack continued. "The Fear Beast reads minds and becomes whatever most frightens its target. If we can see what the human fears, we might understand why he affects us so strongly. And if he shows normal fear responses, it might reassure the other students that he's not the monster their instincts tell them he is." The debate continued for 2 hours, but eventually, desperation won. The Academy was facing its worst crisis in centuries. They needed answers. The next morning, Tom received an unusual summons. Dr. Millick met him at her office, her nervous tentacles betraying her calm voice. "Tom, we would like you to participate in a psychological evaluation," she explained. "It's part of our standard integration process for exchange students." Tom nodded eagerly. "Of course. I've been hoping someone would want to study the cultural barriers we're facing. I have some theories about evolutionary psychology that might be relevant." Dr. Millack led him through corridors he had never seen before, deep into the Academy's research levels. They arrived at a massive biodome, its transparent walls showing a carefully controlled ecosystem inside. Above the dome, an observation deck was filling with students and faculty. "This is quite a crowd for a psychological evaluation," Tom observed. "Yes, well, your case is rather unique," Dr. Millick replied, her voice strained. "Please step inside the containment area." The biodome's interior was designed to look like a natural environment, with plants and streams from various worlds creating a peaceful setting. Tom walked to the center, admiring the exotic flora. Through the transparent walls, he could see hundreds of beings gathering in the observation deck above. "Just relax," Dr. Millick's voice came through the intercom. "We're going to introduce you to one of our training constructs. Don't worry, you're perfectly safe." Tom waved at the crowd above, many of whom actually flinched at his gesture. Whatever was making everyone so uncomfortable, he hoped this test would finally provide some answers. A section of the dome's floor opened, and something began to emerge. At first, it looked like black smoke, but as Tom watched, the smoke began to solidify. The creature that formed was unlike anything he had ever seen, even in his extensive xenobiology studies. The Fear Beast stood nearly 10 feet tall, with a constantly shifting form that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, occasionally sprouting appendages that dissolved back into the main mass. Most disturbing were its eyes, or what might have been eyes, that appeared and disappeared across its body, always watching. The observation deck fell completely silent. Even through the protective barriers, The presence of the fear beast sent waves of instinctual terror through every observer. Several students had already fled. But in the center of the biodome, Tom Bradley stood, calmly watching the creature approach. His posture was relaxed, his expression curious rather than fearful. He actually took a step closer. "Fascinating," Tom said aloud, pulling out a small notebook. "The morphic capabilities are incredible. Are you reading my brain waves, or is it more of a pheromone response?" The fear beast stopped. Its constantly shifting form seemed to pause, as if confused. In all its existence, it had never encountered a mind it could not read, fears it could not manifest. It probed deeper into Tom's consciousness, searching for the primal terrors that existed in every sentient being. What it found made no sense. Yes, there were fears, but they were strange, incomprehensible fears. Fear of being late to class. Fear of disappointing his professors. Fear of running out of coffee. Fear of his mother worrying about him while he was so far from home. These were not the raw, survival-based terrors the beast was designed to exploit. These were the fears of a mind that had never truly been prey, never known the desperate panic of being hunted. The beast's form rippled with confusion as it tried to process this alien psychology. In the observation deck, Dr. Millick watched in amazement as her instruments registered something unprecedented. The fear beast's energy readings were fluctuating wildly, its form losing cohesion as it struggled to understand what it was facing. "This is impossible," she whispered. "The creature should have manifested his worst nightmare by now." But Tom was still standing there, notebook in hand, completely unafraid. If anything, he seemed excited by the encounter, like a researcher who had just discovered a new species. The fear beast made a sound that might have been frustration, a low rumble that vibrated through the biodome. It began cycling through standard forms, trying to find something, anything, that would trigger the proper fear response. Tom watched with scientific fascination as the creature became a writhing mass of tentacles, then a swarm of insectoid forms, then something that looked like a living shadow with too many teeth. "Remarkable adaptive capability," he noted, scribbling observations. "The biomechanics alone must be incredibly complex. How do you maintain structural integrity while shifting like that?" The beast's confusion was becoming visible even to the observers above. Its form was becoming less stable, more chaotic, as if the creature itself was experiencing fear for the first time in its existence. Dr. Millick realized they were witnessing something that would change their understanding of both the fear beast and the human species. But she also realized that Tom Bradley was far more dangerous than any of them had imagined, precisely because he had no idea how dangerous he was. The morning after the fear beast incident, Tom woke up feeling more optimistic than he had since arriving at the academy. Finally, someone had shown interest in studying him, even if the psychological evaluation had seemed a bit unusual. He grabbed his notebook and headed to the dining hall, hoping to find some classmates willing to discuss the fascinating creature he had encountered. The dining hall fell silent the moment he entered. Students who had been eating breakfast suddenly found urgent reasons to leave. A group of Althan empaths actually fled through the emergency exits, their pale blue faces twisted with panic. Tom sighed and collected his meal from the automated dispensers, resigned to eating alone again. He chose a table near the large windows overlooking the academy's gardens and opened his notebook to review his observations. The fear beast's morphological capabilities were unlike anything in the xenobiology databases. He was sketching the creature's transformation sequence when footsteps approached his table. Dr. Millick stood nearby, her 8 arms fidgeting nervously. Her species, the Kalathi, were known for their calm, analytical nature, but she looked deeply disturbed. "Tom," she said carefully, "we need to discuss what happened yesterday." "Oh, absolutely." Tom's face lit up with enthusiasm. "That was incredible. The fear beast is the most remarkable organism I've ever encountered. The way it maintains molecular cohesion while completely restructuring its form defies everything we know about biology. Dr. Millick's tentacles writhed. You found it remarkable? Are you kidding? The energy requirements alone must be staggering, and the way it seemed to be reading my brain waves suggests some kind of psychic interface. I have so many questions about its neural architecture. Tom, Dr. Millick said slowly, that creature was trying to frighten you. Tom looked up from his notes, confused. Frighten me? Why would it do that? It's a fear beast. That's its function. It manifests as whatever most terrifies its target. It has never failed to reduce a subject to complete panic. Tom blinked several times, processing this information. Oh, well, that explains why it seemed frustrated. It kept cycling through different forms, like it was looking for something specific. What did you think it was doing? I assumed it was demonstrating its capabilities, showing off its range of transformations for scientific observation. It was quite impressive, really. Dr. Millick stared at him. You thought it was performing for you? Well, yes. Wasn't that the point of the evaluation? To see how I interacted with unknown xenobiological entities? Tom closed his notebook and leaned forward with interest. What kind of fear responses were you expecting to measure? Before Dr. Millick could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the dining hall. Emergency lights flashed as the Academy's automated systems announced a containment breach in the research levels. Students screamed and ran for the exits as security drones swarmed toward the lower levels. The fear beast has escaped, Dr. Millick said, her voice tight with panic. This has never happened before. Somehow the containment field failed. Tom stood up, grabbing his notebook. That's terrible. The poor thing must be terrified. Strange. Environment. No familiar territory. Surrounded by beings it doesn't understand. Tom, no. Dr. Millick reached out to stop him. You don't understand. The fear beast is extremely dangerous when uncontrolled. It will attack anything it encounters. But Tom was already heading toward the emergency stairwell. Someone needs to help it before it hurts itself. I'll go talk to it. Talk to it? Dr. Millick followed him, her tentacles flailing in distress. Tom, you cannot reason with a fear beast. They reached the research level to find chaos. Security teams had sealed off entire corridors, but the fear beast was moving through the Academy's ventilation systems. Students huddled in locked classrooms while faculty members coordinated evacuation procedures. Tom ignored the security barriers and walked calmly through the empty halls, calling out in a gentle voice. Hey there, big guy. It's me, Tom. Remember? From yesterday? I know you're scared, but everything's going to be okay. The fear beast materialized in front of him without warning, its form writhing with agitation. But this time, Tom noticed something different in its appearance. The creature looked smaller somehow, less imposing. Its shape-shifting seemed erratic, desperate, rather than controlled. There you are, Tom said softly, approaching with his hands visible. You're having a rough day, aren't you? Being loose in an unfamiliar place must be overwhelming. The beast tried to shift into a threatening form, becoming something with multiple heads and razor teeth. But the transformation was incomplete, unstable. Tom could see the fear underneath the attempted intimidation. You're not really built for this, are you? Tom observed, pulling out his notebook. Your psychological matrix is designed for controlled encounters, not free-roaming behavior. This must be like throwing a lab animal into the wild. The creature paused its threatening display, tilting what might have been its head. Tom's words seemed to resonate with something in its artificial consciousness. I bet you don't even know what you're supposed to do now, Tom continued, sitting down cross-legged in the hallway. Your programming tells you to manifest fears, but you need a target for that. Without someone to scare, you're just lost. Security teams had arrived at both ends of the corridor, but they held back, unsure how to proceed. The fear beast was between them and the human, but Tom seemed completely unafraid. The beast began to shift again, but this time toward forms that were smaller, less aggressive. It was cycling through its repertoire not to frighten Tom, but almost, as if asking for guidance. "That's better," Tom encouraged. "You don't have to be scary all the time. That's just your job, not who you are." The creature moved closer, its form settling into something almost familiar. Tom realized it was mimicking shapes from his memories, things that had made him feel safe rather than afraid. A childhood pet, a favorite blanket, the comfortable chair in his grandmother's house. "You're reading my positive associations now," Tom said with wonder. "That's incredible. Your psychic interface isn't limited to fear responses. You can access any emotional memory." The fear beast continued its gentle transformations, showing Tom shapes that brought comfort instead of terror. For the first time, since its creation, the creature was using its abilities to soothe rather than frighten. Dr. Millick watched from the security line in amazement. Her instruments showed readings she had never seen before. The fear beast's aggression levels were dropping to almost zero. More impossibly, it was displaying what could only be described as affection toward the human. "How is this possible?" she whispered to the security chief. "I don't know," the chief replied, lowering his weapon. "But look at them. The beast isn't trying to escape anymore. It's actually calming down." Tom spent the next hour sitting in the hallway with the fear beast, talking to it like a patient therapist with a troubled client. He explained the Academy's structure, introduced it to the concept of voluntary interaction, and even shared stories about Earth's animals and how humans had learned to coexist with other species. The beast listened with rapt attention, its form becoming increasingly stable and peaceful. By the time the containment team arrived with portable field generators, the creature was curled up next to Tom like a contented pet. "I think it just needed someone to understand it," Tom explained as the technicians carefully guided the beast back to its containment area. Fear is a lonely emotion. Nobody wants to spend time with something that only exists to terrify them. As they walked back through the academy, Tom remained oblivious to the stares and whispers that followed them. He had no idea that he had just accomplished something unprecedented. He had befriended the galaxy's ultimate nightmare. Dr. Millick walked beside him in stunned silence, realizing that everything they thought they knew about fear, predation, and human psychology would need to be reconsidered. The soft-spoken graduate student had turned their most fearsome creation into a willing companion, and he seemed to think this was perfectly normal. The Academy's crisis was far from over. But Tom, Bradley had just proven that humanity's greatest threat to galactic civilization might also be its greatest gift. The Academy's Emergency Council convened within hours of the Fear Beast incident. Word had spread through the station like wildfire, carried by shell-shocked students and traumatized faculty members. The impossible had happened. Their ultimate training tool had been reduced to a cowering mass of energy by a single human graduate student. Dean Harath paced the conference room with nervous energy, his massive frame casting shifting shadows on the walls. Around the table sat the Academy's most senior minds, beings who had spent centuries studying the psychology of fear and predation. None of them had ever seen anything like what had occurred in the biodome. "The readings are conclusive," Dr. Millick announced, her 8 arms manipulating multiple data displays simultaneously. The fear beast exhibited every physiological marker of extreme terror. Its energy patterns matched those of prey animals facing imminent death. Professor Gorlak's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the information. "In 300 years of studying interspecies psychology, I have never encountered anything like this. The beast is designed to be incapable of fear. Yet it was afraid," added Dr. Yalara, her translucent form shimmering with distress. Not just cautious or confused, but genuinely terrified. "The question is, What does this tell us about humans? The holographic display at the center of the table activated, showing Tom Bradley in his dormitory room. He was at his desk, typing enthusiastically on his laptop, occasionally pausing to reference the notes he had taken during the encounter. He looked exactly like what he claimed to be, an eager graduate student excited about his research. "He has no idea what he did," Dr. Millick observed. "Look at him. He thinks he participated in a routine psychological evaluation. His latest communication to Earth describes the fear beast as a fascinating example of adaptive biotechnology and requests permission to write a paper about it." Dean Horath stopped pacing. "We need to understand what we're dealing with. Dr. Millack, what does your analysis tell us about human psychology?" The display shifted to show brain scans and psychological profiles. Dr. Millack's tentacles danced across the controls as she explained her findings. "Humans are unlike any species we have encountered," she began. "Their fear responses are fundamentally different from ours. Where we fear death, injury, and consumption, humans primarily fear social rejection, failure, and disappointing others. Their brains show almost no activation in the areas associated with predator recognition. Because they have never been prey," Professor Gorlak said quietly. "Exactly. Earth's evolutionary history is unlike any world in our database. Most planets develop a dominant prey species that achieves intelligence by avoiding predators. But Earth produced something different. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, pack predators that killed through endurance and cooperation." The display showed images from Earth's history that Tom had unknowingly shared through the psychic probe. Primitive humans tracking wounded animals across vast distances, ancient hunters using fire and tools to drive massive creatures into traps, the systematic extermination of Earth's megafauna. "They didn't just compete with other predators," Dr. Millick continued. "They eliminated them. Saber-toothed cats, giant bears, massive reptiles, all driven to extinction. Then they took the survivors and turned them into companions. They domesticated wolves into pets. They made house cats out of wild hunters. They turned predation itself into a game." Dr. Yalara's form flickered with distress. "The fear beast saw this in his memories?" "All of it. Every species on Earth exists at human sufferance. They have become so successful as predators that they now protect their former prey out of what they call conservation ethics. They have turned their entire planet into a preserve for creatures they once hunted." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species represented at the Academy had evolved from prey animals. Their ancestors had survived by recognizing the signs of predators, the confident gait, the direct stare, the casual way apex hunters moved through the world. "That explains the universal fear response," Professor Gorlak said. "Our instincts recognize what he is, even if our minds don't understand." Dean Horath resumed his pacing. "But he genuinely seems to want to learn and cooperate. His intentions appear completely benevolent." "That might be the most terrifying thing of all," Dr. Millick replied. "He doesn't see other species as potential prey or threats. He sees us as interesting subjects to study and understand. We are curiosities to him, specimens in his vast intellectual collection." The display showed more images from Tom's memories. Nature documentaries, research expeditions, wildlife photography. In every case, humans observed other species with the same benevolent curiosity Tom showed toward his classmates. "They study their former prey with genuine affection," Dr. Millick explained. "They find us fascinating in the same way they find dolphins or elephants fascinating. We are their intellectual entertainment." Professor Gorlak shuddered. "No wonder." The fear beast was terrified. It recognized a predator so successful that it no longer needed to hunt. A creature that killed its competition so thoroughly that it now keeps the survivors as pets and research subjects. The conference room's atmosphere grew heavier as the truth settled over them. The Academy had welcomed not just a student from another world, but a representative of the galaxy's ultimate predator species. A species so far beyond the predator-prey. dynamic that they had transcended it entirely. "What do we do?" Dr. Yalara asked. "We cannot simply send him away. Earth is now part of the galactic community. There will be more humans coming. And they all carry the same psychological markers," Dr. Millick added. "Every human we encounter will trigger the same instinctual fear responses. Our students and faculty will never be able to function normally around them." Dean Horath stopped pacing and looked at the image of Tom, still typing happily at his desk, planning research papers and cultural exchange programs. The human looked so harmless, so genuinely eager to learn and make friends. That was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of all. "We have two choices," the dean said finally. "We can acknowledge that humans represent something unprecedented in galactic civilization and try to adapt our institutions accordingly. Or we can find a way to help our species overcome millions of years of evolutionary programming. There is a third option," Professor Gorlak said quietly. "We could try to make them understand what they are. Show them why every other species fears them." Dr. Millak's tentacles curled with anxiety. "That might be the most dangerous option of all. What happens when an apex predator species realizes that every other intelligence in the galaxy sees them as monsters?" The question hung in the air, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Outside the conference room, the Academy continued its daily operations, but everyone knew that something fundamental had changed. The arrival of humanity had shattered the comfortable assumptions that had governed galactic civilization for millennia. In his room, Tom Bradley continued working on his research proposal, excited about the possibilities for interspecies cooperation and scientific exchange. He had no idea that his presence had triggered the greatest philosophical crisis in the Academy's history, or that the galaxy's greatest minds were struggling to comprehend the friendly monster in their midst. 3 days had passed since the Fear Beast incident, and the Academy had not returned to normal. If anything, the situation had grown worse. Students huddled in groups, speaking in whispers about the human who had broken their most feared training tool. Some had already packed their belongings, preparing to transfer to other institutions. Tom Bradley remained completely unaware of the crisis his existence had created. He spent his mornings in empty lecture halls, his afternoons in deserted libraries, and his evenings alone in his room, writing detailed reports about galactic culture and xenobiology. His enthusiasm for his studies had not dimmed despite the obvious isolation. Dr. Millick found herself watching him through security feeds, fascinated despite her fear. The human moved through the Academy with the unconscious confidence of a creature that had never known what it meant to be hunted. His posture was relaxed, his gait steady, his eyes curious rather than wary. Every gesture screamed apex predator to anyone with the evolutionary programming to recognize it. The turning point came when Tom decided to return to the biodome. He had submitted a formal request to study the Fear Beast further, describing it as the most remarkable example of adaptive psychology I've encountered. His proposal outlined a series of behavioral experiments designed to understand the creature's shape-shifting mechanisms and fear response triggers. Dr. Millick had tried to deny the request, but Tom's arguments were compelling. He was, after all, a graduate student in xenobiology, and the Fear Beast was technically a research subject. More importantly, the Academy's board was pressuring her to find a way to make the human integration work. So she found herself once again leading Tom through the corridors to the research level, this time without the crowds of observers. Word of the planned encounter had spread through the Academy like a plague announcement. The observation deck stood empty except for a few brave faculty members monitoring from the safety of the control room. "I've prepared some non-invasive scanning equipment," Tom explained as they walked. "I want to understand how it maintains cohesion while shape-shifting. The energy requirements alone must be fascinating." Dr. Millick's tentacles writhed with anxiety. "Tom, perhaps we should postpone this. The creature was quite agitated during your last encounter." "Oh, that's normal," Tom replied cheerfully. Wild animals often show stress responses in laboratory settings. I've worked with plenty of nervous specimens. The key is patience and gentle handling. They arrived at the biodome to find the fear beast huddled in the far corner, its form a barely cohesive mass of shadow and uncertainty. The moment Tom entered the containment area, the creature's energy patterns spiked with terror, but Tom seemed to interpret this response entirely differently. "Hey there, big guy," he said softly, setting down his equipment at a respectful distance. "I'm back. Remember me? I know this is stressful, but I promise I'm not going to hurt you." He sat cross-legged on the biodome floor, making himself appear smaller and less threatening. It was a technique he had learned working with injured seals, designed to reduce the stress response in frightened animals. The fear beast's form rippled with confusion. This was not the behavior it expected from a predator. Tom's posture suggested submission, but every instinct the creature possessed screamed that this was the most dangerous being it had ever encountered. "I brought you something," Tom said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a thermos of coffee and a sandwich. "I know you probably don't eat regular food, but I thought you might be curious about human cuisine." He opened the thermos and poured steaming coffee into the cap, setting it between himself and the fear beast. The rich aroma filled the biodome, a scent that had no meaning to the creature but seemed important to Tom. "This is coffee," Tom explained, conversationally. "It's made from seeds that grow on my home world. Humans are kind of addicted to it. We drink it when we're studying, working, or just socializing with friends." The fear beast remained motionless, but Tom noticed its form was becoming slightly more stable. He took this as a positive sign and continued talking in his gentle academic tone. "I've been thinking about our last meeting," Tom said, pulling out his notebook. "Your shape-shifting abilities are incredible, but I noticed you seemed frustrated when you couldn't find a form that worked for me. That's actually really interesting from an evolutionary perspective." He sketched while he talked, drawing rough diagrams of the creature's various manifestations. "See, most species develop fear, responses to their natural predators. But humans evolved differently. We didn't have many natural predators because we became pretty good at making tools and working together." The fear beast's form shifted slightly, drawn by curiosity despite its terror. This creature was explaining why it couldn't be frightened, as if it were a simple academic problem rather than a fundamental challenge to the beast's existence. "It's not your fault," Tom continued reassuringly. "You're designed to tap into primal fears, but human fears are mostly social and psychological. I'm afraid of failing my thesis, disappointing my advisor, or showing up to class unprepared. Those aren't really the kinds of fears you can manifest physically." Dr. Millick watched from the control room in amazement. Her instruments showed the fear beast's stress levels actually decreasing. The creature that had been cowering in terror was responding to Tom's calm explanation with something approaching fascination. Tom broke off a piece of his sandwich and placed it near the coffee cup. "This is peanut butter and jelly, another human comfort food. We have this weird relationship with food where we eat things that make us happy rather than just things that keep us alive." The fear beast began to move closer, drawn by Tom's patient demeanor and obvious lack of threatening intent. For the first time in its existence, it was encountering a predator that didn't want to hunt, didn't need to establish dominance, and seemed genuinely interested in its well-being. "You know," Tom mused, "in a way, we're both products of our environments. You were created to be the ultimate fear response, and I evolved to be really good at not being afraid of things. It's like we're opposite sides of the same evolutionary coin." The creature's form continued to stabilize as it crept closer. Tom remained perfectly still, letting it approach at its own pace. His experience with wild animals had taught him the value of patience. "That's it," he encouraged softly. "I'm not going anywhere. Take all the time you need." In the control room, Dr. Millick realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. The Academy's most feared creature was displaying behavior patterns she had never seen before. The fear beast was curious, cautious, but not panicked, and actually seemed to be taking comfort from Tom's presence. The beast finally reached the coffee cup and extended a tentative tendril toward it. Tom watched with delight as the creature sampled the alien beverage, its form flickering with what might have been confusion at the bitter taste. "It's an acquired taste," Tom laughed. "Most humans don't like it at first either. We usually add sugar or milk." The fear beast turned its attention to the sandwich, touching it with the same careful curiosity. Tom pulled out his scanner and began taking readings, narrating his observations in the same gentle tone. "Your cellular structure is fascinating. The way you maintain coherence while shifting forms suggests some kind of quantum-level bonding mechanism. Are you aware of how you do it, or is it instinctive?" The beast seemed to consider the question, its form rippling in what Tom interpreted as thoughtfulness. Slowly, carefully, it began to change shape. But this time not into something terrifying. Instead, it formed a simple geometric pattern, then another, showing off its abilities rather than trying to frighten. "Incredible," Tom breathed, making notes rapidly. "You're demonstrating voluntary control rather than fear response manifestation. That suggests much higher intelligence than anyone realized." For the next hour, Tom and the fear beast engaged in what could only be described as scientific collaboration. The creature showed off various forms, while Tom documented everything, asking questions and offering gentle encouragement. It was the kind of peaceful research session Tom had dreamed of when he applied to the Academy. As the afternoon wore on, the fear beast's behavior became increasingly relaxed. It began responding to Tom's questions with specific shape changes, almost like a form of communication. When Tom expressed interest in its energy matrix, the creature made its internal structure visible. When he wondered about its sensory capabilities, it demonstrated various detection methods. Finally, as Tom's equipment began running low on power, he started packing up his gear. "This has been amazing," he told the beast. "Thank you for being so cooperative. I hope we can do this again soon." The fear beast watched him prepare to leave with what could only be described as disappointment. For the first time in its existence, it had experienced something other than fear or the causing of fear. It had felt valued, appreciated, even understood. As Tom stood to go, the creature did something that stunned everyone watching. It approached him directly, its form settling into a shape reminiscent of a large, friendly animal. Then, with movements that suggested both curiosity and affection, it gently nuzzled against Tom's side. Tom's face lit up with pure joy. "Oh, you're a social creature after all, aren't you?" He carefully reached out and patted the beast's flanks, treating it like a friendly dog. "You've probably been lonely down here. No wonder you seemed so agitated before." The fear beast made a sound that might have been contentment, a low rumble that vibrated through the biodome. Then, in a gesture that would be talked about for generations, it curled up on the floor beside Tom and closed what might have been its eyes. Within minutes, the Academy's ultimate weapon was sleeping peacefully next to the human graduate student, looking for all the world like a massive pet taking a nap with its beloved owner. Dr. Milek stared at her instruments in disbelief. The fear beast's readings showed perfect contentment, the kind of brain patterns associated with deep trust and emotional bonding. The creature that had terrorized military veterans and diplomatic trainees was sleeping like a house cat. Tom sat quietly beside the slumbering beast, making final notes in his journal. "Remarkable social development," he wrote. "Subject displays capacity for trust and affection despite artificial origins. Recommend further study of emotional responses in manufactured organisms." In the control room, Dr. Milek realized that the Academy faced a new kind of crisis. They had created a monster to teach students about fear, and a human had turned it into a pet. The implications were staggering. The galaxy's greatest minds would spend years trying to understand what had happened in that biodome. How do you explain to a species that they're too dangerous to remain when they genuinely don't understand why everyone is afraid? How do you tell the universe's kindest predator that their very existence triggers prey responses across the galaxy? As Tom sat peacefully with his sleeping research subject, planning future experiments and collaboration, the Academy's administrators knew they faced an unprecedented decision. The human exchange program would require significant revisions, assuming they could figure out how to make it work at all. But watching Tom gently stroke the fear beast's flanks while it slept contentedly beside him, Dr. Millick couldn't help but wonder if perhaps the galaxy needed to adapt to humanity rather than the other way around. After all, any species that could turn the ultimate nightmare into a willing research partner might have lessons to teach them all.